Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you, this time talking episode 2 of season 7 of Arrow, Longbow Hunters. And honestly, I was kind of disappointed by this episode. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but it does seem kind of flat. So let's just kind of get right into things. First things first, let's talk about the whole prison subplot. Now I did, in general, kind of like this, but there's still stuff here that sort of bothers me. Um, like for example, there's the moment where Samson says, like, "Okay, you might have gotten your fight back, but keep in mind we're still the big boys around here in this prison." Well, okay, Oliver has already, put you guys are in prison because of Oliver, so that doesn't really seem especially threatening. I guess he's saying like, okay, you can't take on all three of us. Well, come on, man. If Oliver was able to pull this off and all the other stuff he did as Green Arrow, is dealing with these three jackasses all at once really going to be that bad? Well, it's a serious challenge, sure, but Samson is way overestimating himself here. But, I guess he's been used to being in charge of there in the prison for a while now. I mean, dude, you aren't the biggest boy here. You need these two other guys to try and be the top dog. So yeah, I think Samson really has an inflated sense of himself here, especially seeing as how he's probably the least fleshed out of all these people. I mean, I can understand Brick maybe saying that because Brick really was presented as a pretty serious threat. He had his own stuff going on. He was sort of like a subplot boss. These other two guys, jeez, no. Now, I do like that they did make it clear that York was not a bad guy in at least the legal sense. He wasn't taking bribes, he wasn't doing anything illegal, and yet he wasn't a good person, really. Um, they kind of present him as a little bit of a mixed bag, which I did appreciate. For example, he makes a big point that it's like, hey, man, you're going around and you were breaking all these laws, and as soon as you showed up, like all these crazies started coming to Star City, and it's sort of like the whole Batman thing. It's sort of like, well, yeah, Batman does a lot of good. He fights crime and all this other stuff. But did you ever think if like maybe Batman went away, then maybe the Joker and Penguin and Poison Ivy would go away too? Because they pretty much showed up not too long after Batman did. Batman attracts this sort of madness, and people have kind of made this case in the actual comics against Batman, and that all holds about water until it's like, oh well, who else is going to be around? Basically, the idea is like, well, if Batman goes away, then we can hope that these crazy Arkham people will just go away too. Which, yeah, hope is not a plan, as Thomas Jefferson said. Anyway, hold on a second. I've got an annoying pop-up here. I don't really care about my adware right now. Stupid machine. Alright, that's better. But what's really telling about York is that comment that he makes about Oliver. It's like, yeah, man, you remind me of like those spoiled, entitled rich kids that I went to school with. And that's really the core of it. Oliver is really not the problem there in the prison. In fact, it's pretty much the opposite. He's the one inmate that we know for sure who's just trying to keep his head down, is not causing any trouble, just wants to do his time, get out, and go back to his family. And Oliver has said this to York. Oliver has, until he beat the hell out of those guys, really never did anything, as far as we know, and probably not, to really kind of get on anybody's bad side. He was exactly what he seemed, a prisoner who just wanted to be left alone, to serve out his time, and then go on with his life. But York zeroes in on Oliver pretty much because he can. I mean, do you seriously think he would be trying to pull this nonsense on Brick or Bronze Tiger? No, those guys would say screw it and kill him. Which, oh hey, Brick wants York dead for unknown reasons. I'm guessing that his attitude is at least part of the situation. And on this front, this is where we really kind of get into it. At the end of the day, York can, this whole thing about like you making a mockery of law. Like, this is just self justification. This is what York tells himself to justify doing this to Oliver. It's really that you're an entitled rich boy thing. And this is the crux of it. York has found a situation where he even says, you remind me of these people. So really, it's just a chance for York to take out, old feelings from high school, old resentments from when he was a teenager on some guy who has never done him any wrong personally, but he's okay with doing this because he reminds him of people who York feels have done him wrong or whom he just didn't like. I mean, seriously, stop and think about this. He's doing all this crap because Oliver reminds him of people that he didn't like, not because Oliver personally did anything to him. And again, that whole thing about, you being a vigilante, making a mockery of the law, that's just a front. That's just self-justification for him to be a bully to somebody who he knows is not going to fight back. Again, you really think York is going to try this on Samson or Bronze Tiger or Brick? Mm-mm. And man, I cannot stand people like this. I really can't. Now, don't get me wrong. I went to high school with my fair share of rich, entitled punks too. Their families had money. They looked down on the poor kids, thought they could do no wrong. It's like, oh yeah, like even the teachers kind of had to deal with this. Like, it's like, yeah, we can't really discipline that kid too much because his dad's a lawyer and he'll be the first. His dad's a lawyer and a big jerk, and he'd be the first down here to sue us. And that's something I was actually once told by a teacher when I was working as a substitute teacher at my old junior high school. It's like I had to deal with this kid who was a jerk, and I mentioned like, oh yeah, I had a discipline problem with this kid. And he goes like, oh yeah, that kid's a big jerk, but his dad's a jerk and a lawyer too. We can't punish him too hard, or his dad will be down here suing us. So yeah, I know where York's coming from on that one. But the idea that rich or poor, that you're going to judge somebody just on their bank account is, frankly, to me, enormously offensive. There are wealthy people out there in the world who are very kind and generous and good people. And there's a long, long list of poor people who will stab you in the back for a nickel. I have people in my family who are not who are a far cry from wealthy, who absolutely refuse to speak to close relatives due to disputes over a couple $100. Like I think it's like not like $500 at most, but they've not talked to each other for years because of a little dispute over a little bit of money. Uh, yeah. So it's really not the amount of money in your pocket that really, I think, has anything to do with your morality. There are rich people and poor people who think nothing of taking as much as they can from others for their own benefit. And it all ultimately stems from the same source: greed and vanity, saying, I deserve to have this. I mean, really, stop and think about that for a moment. It all flows from the same source. So really, at the end of the day, does it matter if the person being a greedy bastard is rich or poor? Not to me, it doesn't. Anyway, enough pontificating. Let's move on. What really didn't work for me this episode was really the Felicity subplot. Not that it was bad. I mean, all of the character beats made sense. She is obviously terrified of something happening to her family, and she's like, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do whatever it takes to take this guy down. And of course, Diggle would make sense as the first person that she turns to. But, and I do like how they point out that there is no bad guy in this situation. Diggle has different responsibilities, and he has to live up to those responsibilities. And I did love the scene where Diggle lays it out for Felicity as to why he didn't take up the mantle of Green Arrow. And Felicity understands. And, she's she totally gets where John's coming from, and I love that both of them were mature adults about this. There is no bad guy in this situation. John and Curtis are doing good stuff with Argus, but they have to abide by certain rules in order to do that. And Diaz can't be their main focus. That's just not how it worked. You know, as much as a sociopath as Amanda Waller was, she did sometimes have a point that, yeah, it wasn't Argus's job to deal with stuff like this. On the other hand, you know, sort of like, okay, well, it's not Argus's job to deal with Diaz, but he came really close to stealing this crazy dangerous weapon, and he's done all this other really crazy dangerous stuff. Okay, maybe you guys are slumming a little bit, but he's clearly a danger to a lot of people and probably to national security. Why don't you devote a little bit of your resources to like helping the FBI take this guy down or something? But, you know, storytelling. I had some lint on my sock. Let's see. Now, this is interesting that Felicity ultimately ends up going and cutting a deal, trying to make a deal with Watson, or more like, hey, my husband held up his end of the deal, now it's time to do that, to do it with yours. Honestly, I was expecting her to go and team up with Laurel, which would have been pretty interesting, but Felicity doesn't exactly know about the events of this episode playing out with Laurel and Diana, which I thought was solid stuff. I do like how Black Siren did say, like, well, I suppose I have to call her Laurel now. She flat out says to Diana after the end of it, look, I get that you'll probably never forgive me for killing Vinny, but I'm not that person anymore. I have changed, and I hope you will see that eventually. And again, here we have the characters acting like mature adults. Diana is... Laurel, yeah, let's just go with Laurel. Laurel is not owed forgiveness. You're never owed forgiveness from anybody for anything. Forgiveness is always a choice that must be, it is something that must be given willingly. It's not something you guilt trip somebody into, or if you feel entitled to forgiveness, then you're sort of missing the whole point. Now, of course, there are points where people can be unreasonable about forgiving someone. I mean, the word grudge does exist for a reason. But that said, you know, this isn't, you know, you spilled coffee on my couch or something. This is like you murdered my boyfriend right in front of me. I mean, granted, the boyfriend was a murderer who had basically said, like, yeah, I'm going to kill bad guys, and if innocent people happen to get caught in the crossfire sometimes, then, well, oh, sucks to be them. But to be also fair, Vincent did have... Well, there was a chance that he might have been able to be redeemed. Anyway, I did think that plot line did ultimately work out. But it is sort of weird that Laurel seems less afraid of the Longbow Hunters than she did seem of Diaz last year. Last year she was absolutely terrified of Diaz, who, again, is just like a guy who's really good at martial arts and is reasonable. I mean, he's a fairly smart guy. He's a fairly good strategist. He's certainly a very ruthless man. But again, it's sort of like, lady, you have superpowers. Just, you know, kill this guy. Wait until his back is turned and then just, like, kill him. Or, you know, attack him in his sleep or something. So the idea that she would just be so utterly terrified of this guy who has no superpowers whatsoever when she herself has racked up a serious body count and was able to fight the Flash, that's horseshit. Okay? That is utter horseshit. Let's see. Oh yeah, so stuff in the future. Apparently, William, as an adult, had a boyfriend. Okay. I mean, Connor Hawke in the comics They were never really super clear with him, but it always seemed to me like a lot of people were like really convinced that he was gay, but he always read as somebody who was much more asexual to me. Um, I can't remember exactly what they did that canonically, but I always thought that was kind of an interesting way to sort of play it. Okay. Um, but okay, they're going back to Star City. Well, okay, that's fine. Because it's going to be pretty boring if they just hung out on Lian Yu all by themselves. Um, Hinting at where all of this is going to go. Now that's kind of interesting. Like, is this future set in stone? Well, seeing as how this is set in the same universe as Legends, almost certainly not. But time travel would seem rather out of place on a fairly grounded show like Arrow. But they're showing us these flash forwards for a reason, and you can't help but think that this has to be connected to the new Green Arrow, whoever that is. On the other hand, if this guy is a time traveler, then a whole bunch of stuff makes sense. Make the list of people who are going to be the architects of this timeline that you don't like. Go back and see that situations break differently. I mean, that Jason, whatever dude, arms dealer. All right, well, maybe in the original timeline, he played a serious part in having some bad guy get a dangerous weapon. Here, he's in jail and his operation is shut down, so that can't happen. I mean, we've seen stuff like this before. I mean, Sarah Connor Chronicles had this one episode where a Terminator was going around killing all of these teenagers. And it ultimately turned out that these were the people who were going to grow up to be John Connor's lieutenants in the Terminator future. So something like that, I kind of could see it as people who played a part in something really terrible happening, and time-traveling future Green Arrow maybe wants to stop that. Not really, not really something we could solely think of as a possibility right yet, but it is the first thing that comes to my mind, which shows you, I think quite clearly, that I have read way too many comic books over the years. I think that covers everything I had to say, guys, so I'm going to call it here, as always. Oh, wait, forgot to talk about the Longbow Hunters. Yeah, not a lot to say about these guys. Guy who looks like Chris Helmsworth with Captain America, with like if Chris Helmsworth was playing like some sort of like modern Captain America. Okay, you get what I'm saying. Shield dude, who looks a little bit like Chris Helmsworth. Yeah, I don't know anything about that guy. Red Dart, I vaguely remember her from a few Green Arrow comics I've read, but she didn't really stick out to me too much. Silencer is actually a pretty new character in the DC universe. If I remember right, in the comics, she's actually of Maori ancestry, where here they've gotten a black actress to play her. And she's just supposed to be like serious, super dangerous assassin lady. That's all I really know about her. That's about it, guys. Longbow Hunters, not particularly excited about them, but we'll see. Anyway, guys, I'm going to call it here. As always, please comment, rate, subscribe. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi, and also join me on Tumblr at Jedi Reviewer. Until next time, take care and have a good one.